All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something literally mind-bending. We are going to explore a grim, dark, Fichtean fable that reveals a really profound psychological and philosophical process. Basically, we're looking at how to take our daily despair and numbness and transform it into raw, creative power. We'll be tracing this incredible sequence from the absolute depths of a stagnant existence all the way to a state of radical self-affirmation. So get ready because we are diving deep into the Obsidian Sea. So, let me ask you something. Are you feeling trapped in what we call the gray shadow life? We have to start our journey by confronting this massive modern epidemic. It's that stagnant domestic routine and the daily creeping nihilism that just kind of suffocates us. It's the endless doom scrolling at 2 a.m., the soul-crushing corporate commutes, the feeling of being perfectly safe, yet entirely empty inside. To figure out how to break out of this numbing cycle, we first really need to understand how we got here. And that brings us to Chapter 1, the thesis of stagnant order. So in our Fichtean dialectic, we kick things off with the thesis, basically the current state of things. And our starting point here is defined by what the fable calls the porcelain towers of the last man and the sterile granaries of the reading rabble. In this gray shadow life, we hide. We build these pristine, highly fragile towers of Socratic optimism and pure logic, and we do it to desperately avoid the heavy truths of decay, suffering, and death. We repress our grief just to keep up appearances. But here's the secret, right? Those heavy truths are exactly what provide the true gravity of the earth. Without them, we're really just floating around in a sterile void. Which leads us to Chapter 2, the eruption of the antithesis. Because, well, a fragile porcelain tower just can't stand forever without some kind of violent reaction. Enter the red specter. This is our antithesis, and it is a massive, eruptive force. It manifests as the raw, red energy of the Dionysian spirit, basically exploding from the deepest, most primal layers of our being, and its entire purpose? To shatter that stagnant domestic order we were just talking about. Now, modern society might tell you this chaotic urge is just a pathology, a breakdown that needs to be cured. But the sources argue the exact opposite. This is a divine madness. It's a vitalizing, creative chaos that is absolutely necessary for any significant growth or becoming. Now, this red specter brings with it the bloodthirsty hunger of what the fable calls the eater of raw flesh. And yeah, that sounds intense, because it is. This terrifying savagery represents the untamed forces of reality that we so often fear and repress. It's literally the shadow of the last man hiding away in his tower. But this raw energy is exactly what brings back the gravity of reality. It forces us to confront the world as it actually is, blood and all, not just how our sterile logic wishes it would be. The red energy of a new creation. When you actually tap into this Dionysian pulse, that sterile, gray shadow life is completely shattered. The porcelain towers fall. But this destruction isn't just ruin for the sake of ruin. It clears the board. It makes way for a vibrant, beautiful, and, yes, terrifying new canvas upon which you can actually build a life of substance. And that brings us right to Chapter 3, the mystical marriage. Here we see the violent collision of opposites that pretty much defines our existence. On one side, we have the thesis, the Apollonian mask, that stagnant order, pure logic, the written word, and our safe porcelain towers. On the other side, the antithesis, the red specter. This is creative chaos, raw emotion, vitality, and the churning dark waters of the Obsidian Sea. This is the ultimate dramatic tension. You literally can't just live in cold logic, and you definitely can't survive purely in raging chaos. There has to be a reconciliation between the two. And that reconciliation, that is the synthesis. The true synthesis only happens when the Apollonian mask acts as a willing partner to the red specter. The structure of logic and words forms a really sturdy vessel, while the red specter provides the primordial emotional energy to actually fill it. Together, they justify the world as a beautiful aesthetic phenomenon. So you need the mask to shape the energy, but you absolutely need the energy to bring that mask to life. Okay, moving on to Chapter 4, Writing with Blood. Bleed a truth rather than record a thought. I mean, wow, to actually achieve this mystical synthesis in your own creative process, whether you're an artist, an entrepreneur, or just someone trying to design a meaningful life. The red specter demands an act of absolute, heroic honesty. Writing with blood means transforming a simple fleeting pulse into a timeless proverb. It's the exact moment where the Apollonian mask of the word meets the raw red energy of life. You aren't just reciting sterile data anymore. You're pouring your actual lived experience into your work. But encountering this specter, it's not an easy feat. It demands what we call the heroic climb. First, you have to leave the sterile granaries of the reading rabble, those passive consumers of life who would rather watch a screen than live an actual adventure. Second, you have to consume the metabolic fire of your own soul. Third, you've got to pull yourself up by the jagged rocks of authentic, sometimes painful experience. It's tough, but finally, you reach the peaks to breathe the thin air where cold logic fails and only true, lived experience survives. This climb is literally what separates the people trapped in the shadow life from those who are truly alive.
And that climb takes us right to our final section, Chapter 5, Radical Self-Affirmation. So how do we practically live this out every single day? Well, we have to invite the specter in. Do not flee from the eater of raw flesh. When you're faced with failure, heartbreak, or the bitter venom of fate, don't seek an escape in world weariness and definitely don't slap a band-aid of toxic positivity over it. Instead, you have to invite that beast to the feast of the soul. You take that exact pain, the suffering, the chaos, and you use it as the very fuel for your radical evolution. You accept the dark so you can utilize its immense energy. And when you do this, a truly magnificent transformation occurs. By embracing this savage root, you transform from a helpless victim of circumstance into what the fable calls a dithyrambic singer. You are no longer drowning in the chaotic, dark waters of the Obsidian Sea. You've actually mastered them. You're dancing upon the waves. You're taking the raw, unpredictable chaos of life and turning it into a beautiful, incredibly powerful song.
This all culminates in the ultimate philosophical prize, amor fati, the love of fate. This is a twice-born state. It's a radical, primordial joy that bridges the mortal and the divine. Amor fati is when you look at the totality of existence, the porcelain towers, the red specter, the pain, the joy, the jagged rocks, even just the mundane Tuesday mornings, and you say a resounding yes to all of it. The specter is no longer a monster of sin, it's transformed into primordial joy. You have officially turned fate into heroic affirmation. As we wrap up this explainer, we've essentially traced this massive dialectic from the despair of the gray shadow life, through the raw energy of the Dionysian pulse, all the way to the radical joy of Amor Fati. The map is literally right there in your hands. So, I'll leave you with this one final provocation. Are you going to stay safely hidden away in your fragile porcelain towers, or will you embrace the terrifying, beautiful chaos and finally dance upon the Obsidian Sea?